Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Natalie Schlute. I'm your manifestation coach and spirit guide channeler. Today's episode is all about your children because kids are such a big part of our life, and we were children at one point. So, what is it about children that allows them to be so intuitive, so open? We're going to be talking about children as empaths and also highly sensitive children and what the difference is. I have a really great episode that I created in the past about the difference between empaths and highly sensitive people. So I also recommend that you check that out. I also have an episode on tips for parenting an empath, which I think you would do really well with in association with this episode. But today I want to talk a little bit more in depth about children and how things show up for them as an empath, how they evolve with their thinking, their mentality, their emotions, how you can guide them, and what it means to be highly sensitive and how that's different and how they kind of correlate and associate as well. So this is going to be a really great episode for you. Be sure to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you get notified every time I have new episodes. So let's start with just a foundational understanding of what it means to be a child. When we are a child, we are often in an alpha theta brainwave state up until about the age of 7 years old. This means that you're in a slightly hypnotic state as a child. Children in the first few years also don't have language. So they're very intuitive because as a child, all you're doing is interacting with energy. The energy of your mother, of your father, of the people around you, the energy of how you feel when you're hungry, when you're full, when you have to go to the bathroom, when you're sleepy, when you're awake and energized. Everything is a relationship with the energy in your environment, within your body, and outside of your body. And so, this is how we all come into this world as intuitive beings. We are little tiny beings. We are all interacting with energy of everything around us. And so, when we understand that, we can understand how all children, including you as a human being, because this is still a part of you, are intuitive beings. We are always energetically interacting. Now, when we get to the point where we start learning language, we begin to hyperfixate our consciousness and our focus onto words, right? Onto the words our parents are saying, on trying to learn the words that they're saying, on learning how to respond and speak. And so often the focus in our mind shifts out of the physical energetic realm and more into the mind. We start to fixate our mind on words and language. We also fixate on habits and patterns that our parents are trying to teach us, like potty training and learning how to feed ourselves, picking up a fork and actually feeding ourselves instead of our parents feeding us and so forth. So these are a lot of the things that we're learning in those younger years because they're survival skills, right? It's a survival skill to be able to communicate, to be able to understand what someone else is saying, to be able to respond, to be able to have basic actions like going to the bathroom, eating, and feeding yourself. These are all things that we need to learn how to do. And so the focus as a child starts to shift. And the reason we're in a hypnotic state is because in those first 7 years, that is the fastest, easiest way to program the subconscious mind, to program the human mind into being able to do these basic skills. And so in this state, all children are empaths. All children are hyper aware of energy. And it's through training the mind that sometimes we lose that ability. Not that we lose the ability, but we shift our focus so much that we stop paying attention to it. So the empath ability is always there for everyone because we can all feel energy. That's how we came into this world. But it's the ability of shifting your focus back to that and actually being able to tap into the energetic realm again. And so that's why we're all intuitive. That's why we all have psychic abilities. That's why we all have empath abilities. It's just as we become adults, that transition suddenly becomes so our focus becomes so hyper fixated on the external world, on getting a job, on finding a relationship, of starting a family, of all the things that you have to get done in a day, doing laundry, cooking, making sure you're eating, making sure you're getting the kids to bed. We get so hyper fixated on the external reality that often we're no longer focusing on the energetic reality. And that's really where the intuitive empath abilities come from. So understanding that that every child and every human being and every person has that empath ability. Is just based on whether you're noticing it or not. Like, are you actually paying attention to the energetic and spiritual world, or are you fixated on what's going on in your environment? That's really the only difference. It's where you focus your attention that allows you to be more of an empath or not. Often when we're hyper fixated on the external reality and we're ignoring what's going on internally and emotionally in the energetic world, that's when things can build up. Resentment, our own trauma is not being healed, not processing our own emotions. We start to fixate on the external things and the language instead of processing our own emotions. We're not necessarily taught. I mean, some people are. Good for you if you were taught how to process your emotions, how to label your emotions when you're a child, because that was not something that I learned how to do. I had to learn that in my late 20s. But when you learn how to process your emotions, suddenly things don't build up. But often things build up over time. And when things build up, we're repressing our emotions. So, for example, a toddler is throwing a tantrum, and a parent tells that toddler to stop and teaches the children to suppress their emotions. This is not the time and place to do that. Suddenly, those emotions start to build up. It's one thing to say, hey, this is not the time and place, we're going to deal with this later, and then go home and later actually process it, because then we're actually going back and we're dealing with our emotions. But often, more often than not, we're taught just to stop, with the emotional outburst, and we're not necessarily taught to practice questioning what was going on. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? Why did I overreact? And how do I now heal and let go of that pattern? And how do I move forward in the future to make better choices? This is not a process that we learn when we're 2 years old or 5 years old. Again, maybe you're the one in a million that did learn that, but most of us didn't. And so as adults, we need to learn how to do that, because what ends up happening is when we have one traumatic experience after another, even if they're micro traumas, oh, I didn't get the teddy bear that I wanted from the store. And as a child, that's like the end of the world, right? That trauma of like not receiving what you want, or not feeling heard, or not feeling seen by your parents or your school teachers or your siblings or whoever, these little micro traumas start to build up in the system, and they can actually cause us to start creating belief systems of not feeling good enough, of not being this or not being that, of not feeling worthy, of not feeling seen or not feeling heard. And when that happens, now we become very hypersensitive. Hypersensitivity, emotional hypersensitivity, will come from these patterns of feeling like you're not enough. And then when you believe that you're not enough, you start to read into what other people are saying or doing in relationship to you. So on the school playground and so forth, someone will say something or do something, and you take it personally. And it wasn't even personal to begin with, but you become emotionally hypersensitive. So and so did this, or so and so did that. And maybe it's just a pattern they learned. They said something mean because of how their big brother treats them, or how their parents treat them, and then they go treat you that way on the playground, and you take it personally as if that person doesn't like you or they're mean to you, and so forth. And so we can become hypersensitive without understanding that, hey, maybe that person just has their own patterns that they're working through, and maybe they didn't mean it the way they did, or maybe I'm just so sensitive because I don't feel like I'm getting the love that I need. Now, not getting the love that you need doesn't mean that love isn't there. It's just you're misinterpreting what love is, because as a child we make a lot of assumptions, right? We come to these conclusions that aren't really good conclusions, because the critical thinking factor of the beta brainwave state is not there yet. You're still in the hypnotic state from 0 to 7 years old. So you can't analytically think. You also don't have enough lifetime experience to logically rationalize and understand why people say the things they do or do the things they do, whether it's your playmates, your siblings, or your parents. And so as a parent, it's important to be able to begin the conversations of teaching these things to your children, that they get to choose their own emotions. They get to choose the way they think and how they observe and process things. And the more you can get your child to open up about what they're thinking and feeling in association to the experiences they're having, then you can help them process through it. So for example, if they're having a tantrum at the grocery store, maybe that's not the best time and place to go through this whole process, but you can tell them, like, this isn't the time and place, and calm them down. Maybe you can have a quick discussion, or maybe when you get back home, be sure as a parent that you're taking that child aside and saying, hey, let's talk about what happened at the grocery store. Why did you get so upset? Why were you throwing that tantrum? and create a safe space, not coming from a place of being mad at them like they did something wrong, but hey, I love you, I care about you. Let's talk about this. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? And if you can get them to label their emotions, and if you can get them to express to you what their thought pattern was by creating that safe space for them and asking them the right questions, now you can help them process their emotions. You can help them so that maybe they're not so hypersensitive as a highly sensitive person taking things personally. You can explain to them, oh, that's what you were thinking. Okay, I understand. But you know what? You can choose how you think. What do you think about this option? What if maybe that isn't what exactly happened? Maybe what if it happened this way? Help them and coach them into reassessing their thought patterns, reassessing the assumptions that they're making, and letting them know they can choose to feel differently. They can choose to have different emotions. They can choose to have more positive emotions. They can choose to have more positive thoughts. And when they realize, because you're teaching them, that they can choose their own thoughts and emotions, and they can come to you for support when they're having negative thoughts, suddenly you can help them process through a lot of their things before it even turns to a meltdown or a tantrum. And you can actually guide them and train them to take their own power back by coaching them one on one. That's the beautiful thing, is you can actually coach your children into thinking for themselves by asking more questions and giving examples of other scenarios that they could have created assumptions off of. And so this is really the process of helping to train an empath and a highly sensitive child, either one. An empath is someone who is feeling a lot of the energies of other people and things and getting confused and maybe taking on emotions of other children, their parents, of their environment. But a highly sensitive child is one who is holding on to, whether it's emotions from others or their assumptions that they've made and things that they've been holding on to, and not able to process that. And so they're constantly being triggered and feeling very emotional from whatever's going on in their mind based off of assumptions that they've made about life. These are what end up being our limiting beliefs. These are belief systems that we carry through our lifetime if we don't deal with them. Now, if you can get to it with your children and help guide them, coach them through it at a young age, great. It's better off to be able to deal with it early on, because otherwise those belief systems are going to be carried through teenage years, 20s, 50s, through your whole lifetime if you never realize what the root cause is, whether it's feeling not good enough, not having enough confidence, not feeling enough support, not being heard, not being loved, all of these things. And so finding a way to express things, finding a way to communicate things, and then also to process our own emotions from a young age is going to be extremely essential. Children have very creative imaginations and come to a lot of irrational conclusions. And this is where your knowledge and wisdom as an adult can help support them in this process. One note on this I would also like to make is someone who is highly sensitive, and I talk about this in the other episode, the difference between empaths and highly sensitive people. I'm not going to dive into it too much in this particular episode, but I go into how we can have physical sensitivities as well. So I do follow Anthony William, medical medium. He talks a lot about the physical sensations that we have in our body, whether it's neurological issues, a lot of anxiety, OCD, hypersensitivity. You might notice that your child is very hypersensitive to light, to sound, to, physical sensations. Maybe they're sick a lot. Understand that there might be some physical components that are underlying that need to be healed and cleared out. And so things like gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, corn, like there's a lot of things and foods that might be interfering with how their body feels. They may have an overload of heavy metals in their body. Some of that is passed down. It's not genetic, but it is passed down from parent to child. It's in our environment. It's in a lot of the drugs and vaccines and things like that. So we need to be very careful of what we're putting into our bodies as a human, as an adult, but also our children. And there are things that you can do to clear out their body, because the physical body can hold on to a lot of things that are going to interfere with them mentally and emotionally. Heavy metals can settle in the brain. It can cause interference with how their mind is processing information. Like I said, it can cause the anxiety, obsessive compulsive, hypersensitivity, all of those types of things. And so it's important to be aware that there's a physical component. There's also the mental and emotional component, which we've already talked about. And then there's the empath component of energetically pulling in other people's things and not knowing what to do with it. And so my episode on how to parent an empath, and I even have another episode on how to let go of other people's energy, are really, really important on the empath side, on how to process other people's emotions when you're picking it up, how to let it go, and then also how to teach your children through just having them first tap into and ask themselves whether they're holding on to their own emotions, whether it feels like it's coming from someone else, because kids are a lot more intuitive. They're a little more open to the idea of, is it someone else's emotions? Are they feeling, their siblings' emotions or their playmates' emotions, things like that, or their parents' emotions? And then from there, teaching them how to breathe, how to recognize that feeling, and how to let it go out of their body. And then finalizing it by choosing how they want to feel. Because if I had known that I could choose how I feel, if I had known this 10 years ago or 20 years ago, holy moly, it would have changed my life. So if you can teach children how to choose the way they feel, if they want to choose to be happy, they can. If they want to choose to feel calm and peaceful, they can. And they can master these emotions. They're very creative with their imagination. It's so much easier for them to cultivate the emotion of peace, to cultivate the emotion of happiness. As an adult, we can kind of get a little rigid in our patterns, and so it takes us a little more practice and consistency. But if you learn that as a child, that you get to choose your emotions, then you have power, you have control through your entire lifetime, that the knowledge and wisdom to be able to do that, and you get to practice doing that over and over again. It's practice that we should all be doing every given day, choosing to feel grateful and appreciative, choosing to feel present and in the moment, choosing to have faith and trust in our divine path and the life that we're living now and our eternal soul as well. So I hope all of this information helped you in a beautiful way, give you some great tips. Be sure to check out those other videos. And I do have a great download for you, an empath survival guide. It's a free PDF that you can download. So be sure to check out the show notes for that. And I'm so excited to be assisting you and helping you on your journey as an empath, as a parent, and a highly sensitive person. If you love all things about empaths, intuition, and manifestation, be sure to check out all the playlists that I have on my YouTube channel so you can binge watch right now.